So Bitcoin just collapsed to $62,000 and everybody is wondering, how low will it go? Will some of the biggest holders of Bitcoin have to sell their bags? We can see there are some massive losses out there. There is a lot of pain out there. And the same man who predicted the 2008 housing bubble is now warning of a Bitcoin death spiral. So today I want to look at what exactly is happening in the Bitcoin space. I want to look at what is this death spiral and is there something catastrophic happening underneath the surface? I want to look at when is the best time to buy, but we're not just going to be talking about theoretical frameworks. I'm going to be talking about why I just bought the first amount of Bitcoin that I bought in over 3 months today, literally at $62,000. This isn't just going to be speculative. I want to actually get very actionable and talk about why the markets are puking. And it all has to do with traditional finance. This here is the stock chart of NVIDIA. As you can see, it's flirting dangerously with a little bit of a trend line here. But the chart that I'm most concerned with is this one. This is silver. Look at what they did to my boy. Silver's been smashed 45% in the past 2 weeks. Look at this from peak to trough. We're nearly at 45%. And I'll remind you, silver is a $5 trillion asset. But it's not just silver. This here is the chart of the S&P 500. Now, what I want you guys to pay very close attention to is since the April tariff tantrum in 2025, this chart has gone straight up. Now, again, I'm not a TA channel, but I think it's clear that the S&P 500, it's losing a little bit of momentum here. And what's kind of interesting is the biggest correction we've seen in this rally that's gone straight up for the past 12 months has been 6%. You can see the S&P 500 is kind of breaking down a little bit here. What happens if this goes lower? I want to look at that. I think what's happening in silver is enormous. We can see, we talked about the manipulation last week when silver got slammed 39% in a day. And guess what? We're not done here. It also got slammed another 21% today in one trading day. Gold's seen the same thing. Everybody's wondering, well, hang on a minute. If stocks start to tumble, what's going to happen to Bitcoin and gold and silver? We can see this is the NASDAQ. We can see it's also looking like it's on an edge. The NASDAQ is currently at its lowest prices that we've seen since November 2025. And I want to talk about where is the price going to go? Nobody knows. This could certainly be the reset. I love this comment. Nearly as if somebody read my mind. I believe the last tab that I want to run through with you guys today was this chart right here, which I think shows us how volatile the markets get the closer we get to a reset. I don't want to talk about that just yet. I want to get a little bit of a lay of the land, so to say. I want to start looking at some different opinions from different people, some bulls and some bears, so that you guys can make up your own mind as to where Bitcoin is going to go. Let's start with a perma bear, Mike McGlone, in this clip here.
Here, there, not only is it in 2018, I pointed out when Bitcoin was about 10,000, it was going to drop a zero. I was 70% right, 30% wrong because it went down to 3,000. I'm saying the same thing now. I think it can go back to 10,000. I mean, that includes everything going lower, unfortunately, means the stock market. It's just normal. The key difference is from back then, there was only a few thousand cryptocurrencies. Now there's multi-millions, and we've had that pile in from ETFs, the Trump administration kicking in and accelerating it, and it's classic peak bull market stuff I remember seeing in 1999. So in the previous segment, Paul mentioned the VIX at 25. You look at that VIX 200-day moving average, it's a bull flag. Right now it's averaging about 19.5. And the key fact is 120-day realized volatility in S&P 500 is around 10%. If we end the year there, not only is it half the VIX, but it'll be the lowest since 2017. So I'm expecting this Bitcoin plunge to trickle down to the stock market, volatility to pick up, maybe just get to its average around 16%, and the whole thing tilts lower into the year end. I don't know what stops it at this point.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Is there a technical support level in Bitcoin that we should keep our eye on? I mean, that $100,000 level kind of held there for a while, but we've obviously down here at 92,000 have blown past that.
Well, that's now key resistance, 100,000. It was my key inflection point starting in 2020 when I was calling for it. Yeah, I was early and I was wrong for a little while, but the key support was right now is around 90. It's stuck between 90 and 100,000. I think eventually it breaks down and heads towards 50. On an annual chart, 50 is normal. The key thing is you get the sharpest rallies in bear markets. The 200-day moving average has rolled over. MicroStrategy's 200-day moving average rolled over in August. And so maybe we'll get a little bounce, maybe get to 100,000, but I think it's all about responsive sellers. And the key thing to point out is the Bloomberg Galaxy Crypto Index, as of yesterday, was down 14% on the year after rallying about a third. If the stock market just follows that, which I think it might, all the dominoes trickle lower. And the key indication for me for all this is gold grabbing alpha this year. And when gold's alpha, something's wrong.
So there's Mike McGlone calling for $10,000, mind you. That's pretty bearish, but he did mention something interesting I wanted to allude to next. I want to look at some charts before I play the next clip for you, because this is MicroStrategy. There's a lot of people saying that MicroStrategy might have to sell its Bitcoin. Again, there's a lot of FUD. There's a lot of wild speculation. What is clear is that this chart is disgusting. We can see that it's down nearly 60% in the past week. No, that's not a typo. That's 60% in a week. And again, I'll remind you, it's not just a MicroStrategy thing. This is a broader market thing. We can see Bitcoin just saw its fourth worst day of the 2020s. We're down about 13, 14% right now. If you compare that to the previous biggest daily moves in Bitcoin, we saw a 16% down move here, which marked the very bottom of the 2022 Bitcoin bear market. And we saw a 27% crash during that March 2020 sell-off when everybody was, let's say, scared of lockdowns. 27% on the day. So again, it's kind of interesting that we are seeing massive volatility here and peak fear right here. Now, this chart is mind-boggling. This is looking at the Bitcoin liquidation map of traders. So if people think the price is going to go up, they're going to open a leveraged long. If traders think price is going to go down, they're going to open a leveraged short. Now, look at this. We just saw $29 billion of shorts liquidated. If I'm reading this tweet correctly, $29 billion of shorts and $100 million of longs. So that means right now there is more than 290 times shorts than there is longs. I think I'm reading that correctly. 290 times more shorts than longs. So you know what they say about Max Payne and what the markets do when everybody's on one side of the boat? I think the leverage traders tells you everything you need to know. So that's actually looking at what trades are open right now. 290 times more shorts than longs. That's massive. And I think that's because a lot of people are listening to people like Michael Burry. We kind of offhandedly mentioned his death spiral warning in a live stream yesterday. Let's dig into it with a little bit more detail today, because we do have some more information surrounding why Michael Burry is sending this warning and why he thinks that we're going to see a death spiral. Strong words. Not my words. Michael Burry's words. Now, what's interesting is I'm going to show you his tweets in a moment, but let's start reading the article because the article here has a really good chart. Bitcoin is down 40% from its peak. So what's actually interesting is Bitcoin is now down 50% from its peak. I'm going to pull up that chart so you guys can see what we're cooking with. Michael Burry, he was right in the short term. He did predict a little bit of Bitcoin doom earlier in the week. So we can see we've gone from 126,000 to 62,000 today. We are officially in bear market territory. That's where we are. And Michael Burry's belief is that if we get to $50,000, things are going to get really dicey for a lot of the companies who hold Bitcoin. Here's another quote I've got for you guys. It's a little bit alarming. Again, we're going to talk about what might actually be happening here. So Michael Burry thinks that at $50,000, miners would go bankrupt and be forced to sell their Bitcoin reserves. And then this is where the death spiral comes into it. Tokenized metals futures would collapse into a black hole with no buyer. Geez, that's pretty strong language. It's incredibly strong language. Again, I will remind you, Michael Saylor has less than $10 billion of debt, and he has about $50 billion worth of Bitcoin. We can see here, I've got a clip of Michael himself. But before we get into that lengthy clip, as you can see, he has very low debt. And before 2026, for him to ever get into trouble, the Bitcoin price would have to be around $21,000. Now, what most people are missing, and what my little ChatGPT version 5.2 must also be missing, is that Michael's actually built up a cash reserve to satisfy a lot of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt surrounding MicroStrategy. Because a lot of this started kicking off last October and November. People were beginning to say, a lot of these publicly traded Bitcoin companies that have Bitcoin in the balance sheet, what happens if they sell? What most people forget is that Strategy has multiple billions of dollars of cash on the balance sheet. Let me get you the exact figure before I dive into the charts. Because he has all of these preferred notes. We have Stretch, we have Strive, Strife. We have a lot of these Bitcoin yield generating products. And to satisfy the payment of the yield for the next few years, Strategy did this. They started buying cash. We can see today they have, if this article is up to date, over $2.19 billion of cash on the balance sheet. So they wouldn't have to worry ever about selling their Bitcoin. This is very important because, as you can see, Strategy holds nearly 4% of the supply right now. This is an update from Strategy B's very own website. They now hold more than 650,000 Bitcoin, which is about 3.5% of all of the 21 million Bitcoin in existence. So again, they've been very clear. They don't want to sell their Bitcoin. I think if anybody is going to be a forced seller, it's actually the other gentleman who I had on today's thumbnail, and that's Mr. Tom Lee. Because he's sitting on, at today's prices, it must be closer to $10 billion of losses with the massive Ethereum position that he's built up. I forget the exact number of Ethereum that Tom Lee holds, but he holds a lot of it. And this, you know what they say, you create a strategic Ethereum reserve company. What's the old quote? You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. Because we can see Ethereum is down from a $5,000 high to $1,800. That's nearly 70% down. I think he's going to be a lot more likely to sell than strategy, because this is the biggest thing people don't understand with strategy. They're not leveraged. They have not much debt at all. Let's find out exactly how much debt strategy actually has, because it's not much. Again, we'll remind you, they have, let's give you the exact figure of how much Bitcoin they have. $45 billion of Bitcoin. And we can see they have $8 billion of debt. This is what ChatGPT's strategy has: $8.2 billion in convertible debt. So this is what everybody overlooks when they hear all of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt surrounding strategy. Strategy has $8 billion of debt, and they have over $2 billion of cash and $42 billion of Bitcoin. So for them to ever be worried about having to sell some of their Bitcoin for those debt obligations, Bitcoin would nearly have to go to zero. So just keep that in mind. The likelihood of strategy selling, it's incredibly low. Again, this is what I encourage all of you guys to always do. Never get leveraged. Be very smart out there. Don't overextend yourself. It's always good to have, let's say, a little bit of cash on the sidelines. Again, if you do never want to sell your Bitcoin, I always encourage you guys to check out Firefish. Again, today, I took a decent chunk of the apple. I bought half a Bitcoin. I think that's going to be generational wealth in the not too distant future. And that's because I'm borrowing against my Bitcoin. So again, if you do want to borrow against your Bitcoin, highly recommend you check out Firefish. You can get instant loans in euros, in US dollars, Swiss francs. You can literally get a loan in hours, and they're going to give you 30% off your fees if you use a promo code Luke. Again, 30% off your fees. That's significant. Now, again, let's call a spade a spade. Strategy's sitting on a $6.5 billion loss. Yeah, it's great. They're never going to sell their Bitcoin. But let's just be clear. They're sitting on a huge loss right now. What I think is more significant and more important than the $6.5 billion loss that they are sitting on today is the size of their treasury. I think this is the more relevant thing to look at, because even at the very bottom of this crash at $62,000, assuming strategy holds $43 billion of Bitcoin, guess what? They have the 8th largest treasury in the entire world. Look at how much cash Amazon, Google, and Microsoft have in their treasury for their corporation. 95, and 97 billion. Strategy today, this is an outdated chart. This is probably made at the Pico top. But Strategy has 47 billion. They've become a giant. So yes, let's call a spade a spade. They are sitting on $6 billion losses, but they're a $40 billion company. That's insane. They've done great. So will Strategy have to sell its Bitcoin? I don't think so. I think the Ethereum treasury company is going to be first to sell their Bitcoin. Now let's talk a little bit more about where the Bitcoin price is going to go, with a big caveat that nobody knows where the price of Bitcoin is going in the short term or even the medium term, especially me. Caveats out there. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at where the price might be going and why I bought a significant chunk of Bitcoin today. So we can see that right now we have seen 5 red months in a row for Bitcoin. How rare is that, might you ask? Let's have a look. The last time we saw something similar was here in 2018 when Bitcoin was red in August, September, October, November, and then the ass fell out the back end of the car and we dropped 50% in December 2018. We saw 6 red months in a row. Now, that 2018 crash, I remember it very well because that was when I first got into Bitcoin. I first got into Bitcoin in late 2017, and the sentiment in 2018, when we crashed 50% in a month, from memory, it might have happened in a week. Sentiment was horrific. People actually thought Bitcoin was going to zero. I played you the clip early on in today's live stream of Mike McGlone predicting Bitcoin would go to zero in 2018 during this crash. I've never seen sentiment worse. And this is typically when you want to be a buyer. The worst thing you can do is try to snipe a bottom and not buy Bitcoin at $63,000 because you're convinced it's going to $58,000. That's the worst thing you can do in situations like this. And again, that's why we're live today. I made this post. I said we're going to do an emergency live stream today because I know a lot of people are selling Bitcoin. I've got private messages of people saying, should I sell my Bitcoin? You certainly should not be selling your Bitcoin. Again, this feels so much like 2018. Now, I didn't have any money in 2018, not much. So the way that I bought the dip in 2018 was I did this. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this story, but I had a rental contract and I was paying like $15,000 a year in rent. And I thought it'd be just smarter to spend a couple $1,000s on this ute, stick a camper on the back of it, and just live in it for 2 years to buy more Bitcoin. And that's what I did. And that's because sentiment was so horrific. I also lived in this little van for a few months. Look at how small the bed is on that puppy. It was cramped. It was a shithole, but I knew what I held. Yeah, the price of Bitcoin crashed by 50% in 2018. I was convicted on the long-term thesis of Bitcoin. If you're convicted on the long-term thesis of Bitcoin, I'm not saying move out of your home and live in a truck for 2 years. But I'm saying get inventive, get creative if you don't have cash on the sidelines. Because prices like this, if you zoom out 12 months, I think it'll be a generational buying opportunity in the long run. Again, sentiment is your best gauge. As I wrote in this tweet, everyone called me crazy. I even dropped out of university in 2018 to start my own business to buy more Bitcoin. Again, now is the time. That's why I sent out this little emergency post on the YouTube dashboard today. Again, if you guys are not subscribed, make sure you are subscribed. I send out emergency updates like that all the time, but I actually think we're about to tick over 40,000 subscribers. So again, thank you to everyone who is a subscriber. I appreciate you all. Make sure you subscribe so you're notified so that you know what is going to come next. Let's talk about what is going to come next. So why did I buy Bitcoin today? Let's pull up the chart. Let's have a look at what we've had a look at a few times in Bitcoin's history. So that blue line there was when I stopped buying Bitcoin. When we lost the 50-week moving average at about, when the price did it, it was about $105,000. You might have noticed I kind of stopped making the super uber bullish Bitcoin videos for a while there. Because historically, if you zoom out, if you look at the 50-week, every single time we lose that, we've been in a bear market for the next 6 to 9 months. So again, this is important if you want to know where the Bitcoin price is going next. I don't know where it's going, but I'm going to show you what I'm looking at. So you can see in 2014, we lost the 50-week moving average. We saw a bear market for pretty much the next 6 to 9 months at least. If everything is the same this time, You can see losing the 50-week moving average is kind of your first warning that we're in a bear market. When Bitcoin's in a bull run, you can see the 50-week is support. We come back to it in bull runs. Support, support, support. It's a little bit cleaner in in 2017 and 2020. You can see in the most recent run, every single time Bitcoin has a pullback to that 50-week moving average, historically that has been, ooh, look at that for an arrow. It's a big one. Typically that's been support. So that's not very informative, Luke. Well, what does that mean? Where are we going? Let's have a look. Let's have a look at where we're going. Let me bring up some more fancy lines on a chart. What I think is interesting is Bitcoin bear markets, we typically see the 200-day moving average. That's typically the bear market low. Oh, I've done something wrong with my fancy lines and fancy indicators. All you need to know is that's at $58,000. And again, all of this goes out the window, which is why I gave you such a strong caveat. All of this goes out the window if stocks have a 20% pullback. Because remember what happened to Bitcoin last April when we saw the tariff tantrum and the S&P 500 had a 21% pullback, which is, by the way, a normal pullback. We've essentially outlawed 60% pullbacks in the stock market these days because the Fed will just step in with QE. And like we've been saying for a little while, the Fed's already fired up the money printers, so to say. We're just waiting for an excuse for them to turn it on full speed. We know the money printers are coming. So my biggest concern is, what does Bitcoin do if stocks have a 15% pullback, which would be completely normal? I mean, look at that chart. We've gone straight up for a year. No pullbacks. Pullbacks are very common. They're normal. They're healthy. What happens if we have another 20% pullback? Again, I'm not calling for a 30% pullback like we saw in 2020 when the world melted down. But what I want you to pay attention to is stock market is getting more and more volatile. If you look at this thing and you zoom out and you have a look at it on a monthly, what is interesting is the crashes are coming faster. And the dips are being bought up quicker. Look at the 2008 crash, for example. That played out over a year. Look at 2020, 3 weeks. Even the tariff tantrum was pretty quick. Look at this most recent tariff tantrum in 2024. That was a month and it was bought straight back up. What I'm warning you guys to just be on the lookout for is markets are very volatile. If you're convinced that Bitcoin's now going to go to 55K or 58K because you drew some line on a chart, just be really careful out there. I think dollar cost averaging is the best decision always. Dollar cost average into the market, because I saw the comment, time in the market beats timing the market. I love this comment from Stumpy. I've bought Bitcoin every hour for the past 18 months. I am buying Bitcoin now. If you guys missed the start of the stream, I started today off with a fat 0.5 Bitcoin buy. It's my first buy in 3 months. Now, let's talk about something related to this death spiral. Not all the miners. Because this is a very common talking point I'm seeing right now in Bitcoin. Everybody's saying that Bitcoin's at risk because this is what the hash rate's just done recently. And this is why I've seen a few people start warning that we might be setting up for a very similar crash to what we saw in 2018. What we saw in 2018, if I remind you, actually, let's stay on this chart so you guys can see what happened in 2018. In 2018, the hash rate Here we go. This looks like a small dip in the purple line in 2018, but it was actually huge. The hash rate was at 54 million terahashes per hour. The low was 35 million terahashes. That's a 40% crash in the hash rate, and that nearly happened in a week. So it was the crash in the hash rate that preceded this massive crash that we saw in the price of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is at $6,400 on the 14th of November. And it was under $3,400 3 weeks later. It felt like an overnight crash too, by the way, when Bitcoin was crashing in 2018. Now, what's also interesting is Bitcoin saw 4 red monthly candles leading into that crash in December of 2018. Again, like I said, I'm going to try to remain unbiased and show you both sides of the coin here. I don't think you're going to get the opportunity to buy Bitcoin 50% cheaper from here. But I do think it's interesting that we are seeing a fairly big correction in the hash power. Again, let's zoom back out. Okay, it's actually bigger than a fair correction. What we're seeing right now in the Bitcoin hash rate, and this means miners are simply moving offline. So there's less people right now mining Bitcoin. The correction we've seen came down from 1.1 billion. So we've seen about a 25% correction in the hash rate. That means right now there's less people mining Bitcoin. Again, like I said in the beginning of today's stream, let's be optimistic. Let's be positive. If there's less people mining Bitcoin right now, that means there's less competition of winning the block reward every 10 minutes. That's 3.15 Bitcoin, I'll remind you. So again, if you have been on the fence about mining some Bitcoin, now is the perfect time to reach out to my friends at Blockware and learn a little bit more about how you can either mine Bitcoin itself, buy yourself at home, or take advantage of their hosted mining service. Again, less competition on the network. Your chances of mining blocks just went up. Now let's address the FUD. What is true is we are seeing a little bit of a storm in America. And this is why I think we're seeing a little bit of a slowdown in the Bitcoin hash rate. So we can see hash rate falls 12% after US winter storms hit the miners. Right now, the US is seeing a little bit of a storm. This could explain why we're seeing a dip in the hash rate and maybe why this is a different setup to December 2018. Again, the reason why we saw the dip in December 2018, it was multifaceted, but it was more economic. The price of Bitcoin was crashing. It was less economic to mine Bitcoin. Today, it's more of a geographic. What's the word for storms? It's more weather related. Because people have, Michael Burry included, pointed this out. Right now, it costs $87,000 to mine Bitcoin. Naturally, if it costs $87,000 to mine Bitcoin and we just crashed to $62,000, a lot of miners are underwater. And as you can see, this is where a lot of the dramatized headlines are that I'm talking about. Both of these articles were 2 hours ago. Bitcoin miners could face crisis after BTC price falls 50% from peak. There's truth in that, though. If the commodity that you are mining for just had its price cut in half, naturally, you're probably going to turn off. That's why I think it's a reason why we're seeing a little bit of a slowdown in the Bitcoin hash rate. But again, just keep everything into perspective. There is a little bit of a storm happening in America. There is not an apocalypse happening. What's happening right now is we're getting a buying opportunity. That's what's going on right now. And let's just double click on the hypocrisy of China's mining ban, where they banned mining for the citizens, but the government kept mining. Absolutely true. Probably does cost $500,000 to mine a Bitcoin in the UK. The UK's lost its mind. We all know that. Shout out to my poor friends over there in the UK. Let's go through a couple more charts that could be informative regarding Bitcoin's price action. That's what everybody wants to know. So if you price Bitcoin in gold, we've been in a bear market for nearly 15 months now. It's the longest bear market in gold terms on record for Bitcoin. It's kind of significant. Here's another chart that shows the same thing. We're 14 months, getting closer to 15 months. So if you were anybody thinking about when to buy or how much to buy, like, the most important rule of Bitcoin is just don't try to get too cute, too pretty, so to say. I mean, if Bitcoin's down 50%, it could go lower. Absolutely. I'm going to show you some charts in a moment that show why Bitcoin could go lower. But there's also a chance, that this is the bottom. This is, by the way, peak fear. Another indicator that I wanted to show you was this one right here. This shows that this is the fourth time in history that the Bitcoin valuation against gold hit an RSI of 30. Each low that we hit, it was the very bottom of the bear market in 2015, 2018, and 2022. Again, I'm all for break all the models. And that model could break and it could be wrong. Again, we're living in reset times. Central banks are buying gold hand over fist right now. The elites are freaking out. But just keep in the back of your mind, we've been red for 5 months in a row. What is my favorite chart in Bitcoin? It's this one right here. The purple bars are showing us what Bitcoin does in its best 10 days each year. So as you can see, Bitcoin's performance added up in its best 10 days each year, it absolutely dwarfs the performance that you see in the other 355 days combined. Think about that. Bitcoin's best 10 days outperform the rest of the year. So what that means is when Bitcoin moves, it moves really quickly. Doesn't F around. So just keep that in the back of your mind. People in Bitcoin very commonly get caught naked trying to get cute, trying to time the market, trying to trade their Bitcoin. With Bitcoin on an exchange, again, what have we said on this channel for the 6 years now? First video we made was in 2020. Kiss. No, not because you want to kiss this big ugly mug. KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Don't try to get too cute. Buy Bitcoin, put it in self-custody, zoom the fuck out. I don't know if I can say that on a live stream. Zoom out. Everybody watching this stream knows that Bitcoin's going to be higher in 12 months from now. Why would you wait to buy? Buy. We are living in reset times. Again, the biggest topic coming out of the WEF, the World Economic Forum's conference 2 weeks ago, which we covered at length, by the way. Every single day we did a video on the WEF for a week. Make sure you subscribe for updates like that. When shit's actually happening, I try to cover it live. We covered this every day in the WEF. They were talking about great resets, new world orders. We even had Ursula von der Leyen talking about the Nixon shock and how America left the gold standard in 1971. I didn't think I'd hear them talk about that. But they are very clearly worried about resets. They're talking about resets. Geopolitical and economic risks rise in the new age of competition. Again, I love that. They just admitted we are winning. The new age of competition, what does that mean? Globalization and globalism and the globalists are failing. Again, I'll remind you some of the biggest risks that they talked about. Look at this, number 2. Misinformation and disinformation is the second biggest risk to civilization over the next 2 years. I wish I was making it up, but I'm not. This is why they're trying to ram through CBDCs. Again, I'll remind you, look at number 4 on this list. Extreme weather events. The World Economic Forum. Some would say predicting. So others would say orchestrating. Again, be very careful. What's another tool that we always tell you is a must-have to protect yourself? What happened with the California wildfires? As we can see, Bitcoin owners, devastating California fires are a wake-up call. This is because people didn't have their ducks in a row. Again, prepare yourself for the extreme risks of weather events with a Bitcoin backup that's actually going to survive fires or floods or hurricanes, tornadoes. This is why I always tell you about Stamp Seed. If you haven't backed up your Bitcoin hardware wallet with titanium, stop staring at the charts. We're going to look at the charts more in a moment. Step away from the charts for a couple of hours and go and secure your generational wealth. Again, you should all be buying a shit ton of Bitcoin today. It's on sale. Not financial advice. Nothing I say here is financial advice. But go buy some Bitcoin. That's what I'm doing. Back it up correctly. Good news. Stamp Seed's running a massive winter sale right now. You can get up to 30% off many products on Stamp Seed because of their winter sale. As you can see, if you want to buy a deluxe titanium seed stamping kit, it's 12% off. Then you go and stack that with promo code Luke15. You're going to get an additional 15% off so that you can tell the globalists and the fearmongers at Forbes, who are warning about wildfires, tell them to shove it where the sun don't shine, because you'll be protected. Now, I did say we're talking about price. I do want to talk a little bit more about price. I've actually got a video because Yahoo Finance was kind of losing its mind today surrounding the Bitcoin crash. So we heard from Mike McGlone, who I think is probably nearly the most bearish person on Bitcoin on the face of the planet. $10,000 Bitcoin was his prediction. That's nuts. Again, if you missed that video and you joined us late, go check it out at the beginning of today's stream. But let's tune into another clip that I've got prepped for you. Because this is on Yahoo Finance. A good gauge of normie land. Let's tune in.
It was at 2025, and now we are below them, and solidly so. That's not even close. So what I said is that's probably crypto winter. And the beginning of it was actually up here, although we didn't know it at the time. And I keep hearing analysts talk, incredible analysts, about the 4-year cycle. And I know you've talked, and you've read the same 10x research.
Yes, exactly. So 10x Research, you and I both read the report this morning, and they're talking about a potential low of 40.
Yes.
And they say that's not going to happen in the short term. They're looking more towards sort of September. FIFA, I think the World Cup is like their peg for it.
I looked that up. So that's mid-June to mid-July, and so that would be the beginning of the window. And I think September would be the end of the window. So we've seen this cycle play out before. Let me put a 10-year chart so I can show you what happened over the last crypto crypto winter. So here we had 20 to 2022. We had this double peak here, and then it took a while to find a bottom. We eventually did, but then it's off to the races. Here we have a little bit of a different structure here, but a double peak, and it looks like, if you extend this line, we'll have that bottom maybe sometime in the fall, or maybe as early as summer. But I was talking to Mark Newton on an episode of Stocks in Translation. He's the top technical strategist for Tom Lee, and specifically mentioned the 4-year cycle, which I thought was interesting. And let's take a listen to that.
I don't sense it would go down 80%. Personally, I think it's going to be capped. I think Bitcoin, in my own view, goes to 60, between probably 60. High 50s, 60. I don't think it's going to be a straight shot.
So he's not quite as pessimistic.
Well, he did say it could dip into the 40s. So I'm not hearing anything about an 80% wipeout. So I guess that's the good news. And the other good news is that Bitcoin is very cyclical. We've seen these cycles play out before. And so you just got to kind of hold yourself right here if you're a hodler, or if you want to buy, just wait a little bit.
Well, what I thought was really interesting about that 10x research report is the whole industry. I mean, you and I have been talking to people in the crypto industry for a while. They were so excited about institutional adoption. It's going to become more normal for people to hold Bitcoin. Well, guess what? That's a double-edged sword, because when it starts going down, those institutions are not necessarily willing to step in there because we don't know how much more it's going to go down.
Right.
And they are buying and selling in more size than a retail investor.
I think the bottom line too is we need kind of a new catalyst. Web3 was, it's kind of petered out, and I've looked into the venture capitalist markets. They're not able to fund projects the way they were in the past. They're just not attracting investor capital. So there needs to be a new thesis here, some kind of, maybe the technology hasn't even been invented yet. Maybe it integrates with AI in some way, but the old paradigm is kind of dead here. 2025, the most bullish year in terms of financial regulation for Bitcoin ever, and we didn't really see that much.
Well, and that suggests that the Clarity Act, which the industry is now pushing, including and sort of led by Coinbase's Brian Armstrong, which will clarify more of the pipes and the regulation around crypto, that suggests that even if that does get through, it might not be a very long-term catalyst.
No, I think we need new tech. That has to be the catalyst here, but that's just my personal opinion.
We'll see if it happens.
All right.
Thanks, Jared.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
Okay, and I don't know that guy. He could be a nice guy, but what I will say is his opinion's terrible. We don't need new tech. Bitcoin doesn't need a new narrative. Bitcoin right now, in its current form, is a good enough store of value to have $500 trillion of wealth in the world parked into it. It has 21 million coins. Its supply hasn't changed in 16 years. Its rules haven't changed in 16 years. Bitcoin doesn't need new tech. Let's be very clear. Bitcoin doesn't need an upgrade. All we're seeing is a hype cycle. And Bitcoin has seen many hype cycles previously. I want to dive a little bit more into the charts if we want to determine where the Bitcoin price might go in the future. But I think the next myth that I want to bust is the idea of Bitcoin's volatility decreasing. A lot of people have been saying that Bitcoin's volatility, the institutions have arrived, so it has to lower. BSTEC in the chat says, I thought Bitcoin went from being an 80 vol asset to a 40 vol asset. What happened? Great question. Its volatility never declined. The people peddling you that narrative don't understand first principles. It's as simple as that. Bitcoin's a $2 trillion asset. It's a tiny little $2 trillion leaf floating around in a $900 trillion pond. Why would its volatility decrease when it's $2 trillion in size? Gold and silver absolutely just kicked the door open on that narrative in the past week. Gold's a $33 trillion asset. It just got smoked 25% this week. Now, again, smoked, that's strong language. It's a pullback. Gold's in a historic bull run, and 25% corrections are completely normal, especially after the chart's done what it's doing right now. Look at how parabolic gold is. Gold's the best performing asset for the year, but look at the volatility. Gold has proved It must have been a $50 trillion asset last week, because it's $33 trillion right now, and it had a 21% pullback over 3 days. Gold just destroyed the narrative that Bitcoin's going to see decrease in volatility. No, we're never going to see decrease. I don't think we're going to see Bitcoin's volatility decrease until it's 8 figures a coin. And that's, I just think about it for a moment. If Bitcoin's 8 figures a coin, it's more than $10 million. That means its market cap's in the hundreds of trillions. Again, gold has a $50 trillion market cap. It's still trading like a shitcoin. Look at this. It's a $33 trillion. And silver, by the way, it's $3.95 trillion today. It's the 5th largest asset in the world. It was above $5 trillion last week. Silver's nearly lost $2 trillion of asset value. No, that's wrong. Silver's nearly lost $4 trillion of value in a week. Well, you can see it's 3.9 trillion today. Have a look at the chart of silver. Silver's down over 40% last time I checked. Look at this. Silver's nearly lost $5 trillion in under 2 weeks. That's 5 Bitcoins. Literally. That's 5 Bitcoins. Bitcoin's $1.2 trillion in market cap. Look at it. We're all the way down below Broadcom. What the hell is that? It's embarrassing, Bitcoin. Lyft. We're still above Berkshire Hathaway. Old rat poison squared. So again, the first thing I want to address is Bitcoin's volatility. I have not seen a credible argument for why it should be declining. I think that's bullshit. I've always thought it's bullshit. I've been the one person saying the power law is going to break. Now, if we want to know how deep this Bitcoin correction could go, let's have a look. Because the data has shown that Bitcoin corrections have been getting smaller every 4 years. So in 2011, we had a 94% pullback. In 2014, we saw an 87% pullback. We saw a slightly smaller pullback in 2018, 85%. Most recently in 2022, we saw a 77% pullback. Now, what would happen if we saw something similar from our $126,000 peak? A 75% pullback would take Bitcoin to $31,000 a coin. Do I think we're going there? I don't know. Nobody does. But it's a higher probability than zero. It wouldn't change anything in my eyes. If Bitcoin goes to 30K, I'll be a buyer. I'll buy more Bitcoin. It's as simple as that. Today was my first buy in 3 months, but I'll buy a whole lot more if we get to 30K. I'll be backing up the truck and I'll be putting Bitcoin into my forever wallet. Again, I want to talk a little bit more about bottoms in a moment, but again, go and set up your own forever wallet today. Yeah, grabbing a Trezor or a Ledger, it's a great start. Protects most people. Don't get me wrong. But I think a time-locked Bitcoin wallet can put some extra security on top of your generational wealth. That's why I always tell you to go check out what Bitvault's created. They've got a simple, easy-to-use app that helps you to create multi-signature or time-locked Bitcoin wallets. I believe you can get 10% off if you use the link down below in the description of today's video. And again, if you do need your hand held as you're taking self-custody of your Bitcoin, whether that be simply taking your coins off an exchange or setting up a hardware wallet or setting up a complicated multi-sig or time-locked wallet, reach out to my friends at the Bitcoin Way. They're going to give you 30 minutes free consultation if you use the link down below in the description. I think it's a no-brainer. especially while everybody is absolutely glued to the screens with the price going down. I'll give you guys a quick recap in a moment for Baron. He asked, so I'll deliver. I've got a couple more things I want to show you first before we do a recap on today's show. We've covered a lot of ground today. If Bitcoin goes to 30K, I'll be buying, and I hope you all are too. If you zoom out and have a look at Bitcoin's historical price action, that would be normal. That would be fine. That would show that Bitcoin has seen more adopters since the 2022 low. That's what we're seeing here. Bitcoin's a new technology. It's being adopted by the world. Every 4 years, there's a reason why we set higher lows every 4 years on this price chart of Bitcoin. Again, most people who don't understand Bitcoin, they've never seen the chart like this. They've never zoomed out. When you look at it like this, it's pretty clear what's happening. Every 4 years, we set a higher low. It's not just magic. Bitcoin's a technology with 21 million coins. If you see more people wanting to hold some of those 21 million coins, price is going to be higher. The hype cycles and the parabolic moves in between, it's just noise. That's all it is. It's just noise. Oh my Lord, guys, there's 1,000 comments in this live chat. Welcome to everybody. I'm going to try to get to as many of these as I can get to. This is the worst 4-month stretch for Bitcoin. The last time it was this gruesome was December 2018. It's absolutely rough out there. This is the buying opportunity. Guys, if you got money on the sidelines, buy. Let me get through all these comments. Absolutely, this is not financial advice. Well said. Down Under Blues missed most of the show. Stay tuned. I'll do a quick summary for you guys in a minute. To Carlos's point, I think we'll see 126 sooner than most people think. That's because I think the 4-year cycles are a little bit different. It's tough to say it's failed right now, considering Bitcoin topped in October, nearly to the day of when it was supposed to top. But I think we're going to bottom a little bit quicker. It's just my opinion. Could be wrong. This is a great point. From peace, love, light, and truth. Bitcoin could go lower, probably. But you don't want to miss the dip. Bitcoin's at $63,000. Even if you're convinced that it's going to 58 or 50, you'd be crazy to not at least start averaging in right now at 63. Because who knows? Could be the bottom. Could be. Nobody knows. Buying at a 50% discount, it's not bad. I'll take it. Don't get too greedy. What do they say? Get greedy when others are fearful, but not too greedy. Don't get too greedy. I think that's a great summary of today's video. Keep a very close eye on the broader stock market. I think until we reclaim this blue line, and again, we've been talking about this blue line on the channel for months. We made a video here on the channel as we broke this 50-week moving average, and we said, hey, I'm bullish, but that ain't pretty. Every time we've broken that blue line, we've been in a bear market for the next 6 to 9 months. Knowing how low that bear market's going to go or when it's going to finish, nobody knows. But I'll do my best to keep you guys updated along the way. I don't know the movie quote either. Well, that said, guys, I've been yapping for an hour. Summary, buy the dip. This is a great buying opportunity. Keep an eye on the markets tomorrow. If they puke, we could all be more blessed than we are right now. With all that